Welcome to the GameMinder Report, your weekly source of upcoming gaming news and information. I'm Jeremy, and this week's interview is with Sam Marcus. How you doing, Sam?
Pretty well, thank you.
As you out there in cyberspace may or may not know, GameMinder is headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio. And we're lucky here in Cleveland to have a pretty active game developers meetup group that I've participated in for almost a year now, and it was at this group that I met Sam Marcus. Playing games since forever and making games since around 2009, Sam is the CEO and primary janitor of WhileTrueFork, which just released their second game, The Oregon Whale, for iOS with an Android version coming soon. When not building games of his own, Sam helps spread the knowledge needed to make games through workshops and meetups. So, Sam, you have a new game out called The Oregon Whale for
Yeah,
iOS.
actually, that did come out for Android just recently.
Oh, it did just come out. Okay, on the
Yeah.
on the website it still says coming soon.
I probably should have some press release awareness.
Okay. So it is out for Android. That's awesome. All right, well, we'll make sure we link to that as well.
This is a great, incidentally, plug for why a service like GameMinder is useful.
There you go. Very good. Very good. Now, I do want to talk in depth about that game,
Sure.
but its name, we're going to get to that in a minute because its name and some of the subject matter sort of harkens back to an earlier time. Is it
Yeah.
fair to say that the Oregon Trail figures heavily in your gaming history?
Um, Man, I played, I think, two versions of that, three versions in elementary school. The first was for like the Apple IIe or something that was all line
Yeah.
art, and the only thing I remember about that version was when bandits attacked, you would shoot them with the same interface as hunting, and then the implication was that you ate them.
That was the implication. I remember
So
that.
that's an interesting thing to impart on first graders.
And what
Um,
were the other versions that you played?
The other version was the classic one, the classic black and white one
Sure.
with the we had to lead the hunting a little bit. You weren't a guy on a field hunting, you shot from the bottom, and it was all about taking basically a wagon full of bullets
Hmm.
and nothing else.
I just know my main remembrance of the Oregon Trail was that I always wanted to shoot everything, and I always wanted to
Yes.
take all the meat, and it would all go bad.
Right. That was actually one of the lessons they folded in a way that I don't think anyone realized.
Yeah,
And that was the whole you had no disincentive to shoot every buffalo.
every buffalo.
Yeah, because there was no reason not to. I mean, you lost
Exactly.
the box of bullets anyway, and you're like a sixth grader, so why aren't you shooting things?
Right. Right.
But you can only take back 200 pounds, no matter how much meat you shot.
Yeah.
And this was meant to be an illustrative example of some of the lack of incentive and contract keeping in the sort of frontier that led to rampant depopulation of a lot of the fauna out there. I don't think most people picked up on that. I think most people just picked up on the fact that you can only carry 200 pounds of buffalo at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what other games forged this desire in you to make your own games over the
Well,
years?
oh man, I want to make my own games forever. I think a lot of gamers have wanted to do that. I think
Yeah.
that's there are probably more game in quotes designers than there are game players almost. Um,
Okay.
Like, and for a while, everyone, I feel like everyone, or virtually everyone who goes through a CS or math degree at some point aspires to be a game designer. And partly because it's very easy to have a good idea,
Yeah.
and um, the implementation is always the kicker.
Execution is everything.
And that's actually the impetus for Oregon Whale. Sarah Gross, who was the lead designer and the artist for the game, she thought of the game a while ago and posted a joke about it on her Twitter feed with some fake art. And there's a lot of backburnerism in the indie game community.
Sure.
There's a lot of projects that get 80 to 90% finished, and then they sort of get relegated to the someday
Yeah.
pile. And this had happened to her a couple times, and she wanted to sort of get something that was out there, and so she found a very narrow scoped game. And Oregon Whale has a pretty narrow scope. It's basically a joke and a variation on sort of the infinite running genre. And we got some fun music in there, and you know, we picked it up actually. We're the second people to work on it.
Okay.
The first project was a good example of the sort of backburnerism. So it got started and then not quite finished, which was, I think kind of tragic slash comic because that was the whole thing that the project was meant to defeat was that phenomena. But they we took it over. We got it out there, and it's done now. So it's released, and it's not like I'm not gonna say we're gonna topple the Angry Birds empire with it yet.
Yet.
Yeah, but we have plans for it. They involve pie.
Okay. Now, yeah, so now you mentioned a couple things in there which were all in my list of questions to get
Oh,
to. So
cool.
let's sort of start picking some of those apart. Specifically, the infinite running genre. This
Yes.
idea that there is a specific the challenge in a game like that is you are going to lose, period. The
But
question is how long can you hold on?
it's like a skill endurance challenge.
Exactly. And so, some perfect examples of this game that have achieved pretty decent notoriety is something like a Jetpack Joyride, which is, sort of I would say probably the prototypical example on iOS right now that most people are probably familiar with.
But well, there's a lot in the genre. You could argue Temple Run is the
Sure.
same.
Yeah. Temple Run is another great example.
The left to right, it's a forward with turns. Cannonball is a pretty classic example. Um,
What do you think is compelling about that gameplay?
there's a couple these have a couple major selling points, and this genre, and the reason it has, I guess, legs on the App Store. One is that you can very easily implement it as a one finger game,
Yeah.
and one of your earlier podcasts, you talked about how one of the reasons that iPad is a great game platform is you have more room. You can be more expansive.
Hmm.
And on a phone, there is a very limited real estate factor for you to use, and every finger blocks graphics.
Yeah.
So having one finger as opposed to two or three is a pretty substantial advantage. Also, most people hold the phone with one hand and they want to use their pointer finger for the other main control device, and a lot of casual gamers don't have the same sort of unnatural hand-eye coordination, finger reflexes that maybe we come to expect in the sort of the core gaming communities.
Sure.
So that's one thing. On the other hand, we also have, I think, two core psychological phenomena. One is that they're relatively quick games to pick up. There's no ramp to speak of. The ramp is just the skill endurance. It's how long can your reflexes last, and that itself has something of a degree of the slot machine spirit to it. There's always the, well, next time next time I can do a little bit better,
Yeah.
and I think that's true as long as the player feels that they lost through a combination of a little bit of luck and a little bit of they saw what was coming and they hit the finger just a little too late. As long as they have that kind of exit, I feel like there's a pretty strong incentive to go try it again later. I think Super Hexagon is very much the same way. If you've ever played Super Hexagon,
I have. I don't know that I would agree it's the same way. I think that there's just a little too much luck in that game. And
right,
maybe it's a twitchiness issue, but man, I can't get past like 6 seconds on that game.
right. But there are people who will consistently beat 30 or 40, so it can't
Yeah.
just unless they're really lucky.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Okay, so now
As
um
the bull of the App Store, and I think that's true.
it's the mechanical bull.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So now this is actually the second game that WhileTrueFork has
Yeah.
released. You released something called System Protocol 1. And why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
It's like a sort of Tron-ish, arcadey kind of inspired 3D tower defense game.
Yeah, that was what jumped out at me when I was looking through it is that it's tower defense, but then it all turns around.
So one of the things that people do when they sort of get into the game field, I think, is they take whatever their background is and that's their hammer, and they start looking for nails that fit it.
Yeah.
So I tried to do a tower defense game early. I figured that was pretty limited in scope, but I kind of let the scope get away from me because that's what happens when you make your first game.
Yep.
But I was a math major, so I said, "What can I add to this genre?" I said, "Oh, well, let's stop playing on a plane and let's start playing on like the surface of a cube or a cylinder." And those are really the only shapes that I implemented. There were a lot of requests for Mobius strips, but which sounds really cool, but it actually not. So because they actually don't add anything except a huge amount of it's for math reasons. It's a bad idea.
Sure.
Originally, my idea was that it was going to be very much a hardcore focused game. Like it was entirely keyboard driven. It was meant for sort of console jockeys. Like there wasn't a command line per se, but everything was going to be keyboard and hotkey driven. I had like half the keyboard mapped out, and it was frightening. Um, and I was really good at that, and every tester hated it.
Yes, well,
So that's probably because 'cause they're terrible people, but I have no control over the quality of people who buy the game. So I sort of sucked it up and admitted that I was probably wrong if I wanted people to ever to enjoy the game and put a mouse interface in, and that works pretty well. It's a lot faster for some things.
and that is available on Steam.
That's on Steam, yeah. I
And when
got
did that come out?
ooh, December 7th of 2010.
Okay.
It
Okay.
was a really good time to get on Steam, actually. Mac had just opened up, so they were looking for Mac projects. It was right before the first big sort of indie explosion holiday sale bundle thing they do. So I got sort of by accident into a bundle. Um, Project Greenlight now is their whole weird. No, that's a TV show. But whatever the Greenlight system is called is their
I think
whole
it no, I think it is called Project,
something Greenlight system Greenlight.
yeah, something like that.
I think it's a spy. Anyway, that's much more of a, I mean, much more of a marketing thing now. You have to sort of market the game to players to get votes, and it's sort of like a weird reality TV show. And I haven't really followed that right now much because most of what we're working on at the moment is sort of geared towards tablet.
Okay.
Um, but it was a really good time to get into Steam to sort of buy a bunch of random factors coming into it.
So now this leads into the next big topic that is always on my mind, even more so again now this week. As sort of an independent game maker, obviously we've got these things like the Project Green something. We've got, the Ouya coming. Now this week we just found out that there's something called a Game Stick, which is basically going to be another, I don't know if you saw this, but it's going to be another Android-based dedicated gaming console for the living room. Um, and I'm just wondering how you see the sort of indie market shaping up. Is it a rising tide lifts all ships, or is it going to be too crowded to make a difference, do you think?
I think it's a combination of those, actually. I think it's going to be sort of a rising tide, but we're spreading the tide out among more and more and more people. So what we're seeing right now is an immense amount of barriers falling,
Yeah.
right? Game design is arguably the most technically demanding art that humanity's ever come up with because you need to be good at everything, right?
Yep.
You need programming, which is a skill that could only have existed for the past 40 years. You need some form of art. You usually need some form of music, sometimes writing. You need to have a sense of sort of a gestalt to put it all together. And so for a long time, the game designers were sort of the chief artisans or the head artisans in the programming world because it was the most demanding sort of recreational thing you could do. And that did two things. One is that it was this pedestal that I think a lot of people aspired to be. And another thing was that it had all these intrinsic barriers. You needed to know, I mean, in the 90s that you had to know C++, you know? Um if you want to be an artist now, you have to know Maya or Blender or Moto or something. You have these very, strict technical requirements, but it's becoming less and less the case.
Yeah.
And now you can get Unity or Game Maker or anything like that. It opens a lot of doors. So there's a lot of pre-built assets you can use. Asset creation is generally easier. We're getting to the point where I saw a deal for like a $99 piece of software where you took like a dozen pictures of an object from different angles and it just made a 3D model of it for you and textured it.
Hmm.
So all these barriers are lowering, and at the same time, the average skill level is rising as these skills become sort of mature skills that are showing up in classroom curricula. And I think what that's going to do is kind of commoditize the creativity in our field. So I think a lot of people talk about the challenges of game discovery, and
Yes.
and there are certainly places where it's a problem. So like at the App Store has terrible game discovery.
Yep.
You have to if something's not on the top list, you have to know it's there. And I think that's a legitimate issue, but I think it's not the cure all people are expecting it to be because really, when I think people complain about or game discovery, what they're really complaining about is that their game isn't being discovered.
Yeah,
And there's only so much room. There's only so many gamers. Like the number of game designers right now is growing faster than the number of gamers. Like if you look at the number of games you could buy for 99 cents in the past 5 years, right?
true. Yes.
From essentially zero to probably over a million. And while 99 cents is a pretty low buy-in, it costs me as a player more than 99 cents, sort of my time and effort to actually go and seek things out. So there's a very big disincentive to seek out new stuff. There's only so many games I can sort of store in my stack, right?
Yep.
And so I think what we're seeing is essentially everyone's, with a few exceptions, we're going to see, I think, average sort of profit per game sort of lowering more towards a
Yeah.
new equilibrium where you I mean, when I tell people, because I lead workshops and people come and ask me, "Oh, my son wants to be in game design, and or I want to make a game," and the first thing I tell people is that you cannot succeed in this industry, especially as an indie, without funding. If you need to do more than make a game, like if making a game and releasing it, if that's going to be good enough, then you'll be fine because at the very least you can do that. But
Yeah.
the decision to make a living as an indie designer is a very difficult one and one that you don't have a total control over.
And now, and just to be, for full disclosure, you work a day job in addition to being an indie game designer.
I work in hospital IT doing consulting stuff. So I mean I work a 40-hour week plus travel sometimes, and gaming is my what I think about a lot, but it's definitely my side job. But I think
Uh,
that sort of keeps me sane too.
sure. Sure. Well, so now I think that you made some very interesting points there about games discovery. One thing though, and again, I understand that I am probably not a typical consumer, but I do think the largest complaint is games discovery is terrible because my game is not being discovered. And I understand that point of view. But I do know that as a game player, games discovery, just in terms of filtering, we went through this same kind of a thing with YouTube. For a long time, the only online video that was out there were like QuickTime trailers of movies. And therefore, if you wanted to watch a video online, you knew it was going to be produced by a big studio and it was going to be for some sort of content that you liked. Then YouTube came along and there's just junk. And the social filter is basically what aided video discovery there. Videos would go viral and that's how they would get good. Are we just sort of waiting for that moment in games to come along and sort of become the social filter for this stuff?
Some of that, like I know for iOS, I have purchased games because I've seen a friend in Game Center who had a game.
Yeah, me too.
Um, and I've definitely purchased games based on recommendations. I think this, I think that the star rating system, whenever I see a game that has a lot of generic positive reviews, I tend to assume those are salted.
Yeah.
And so to me, the star system has a lot of built-in sort of non-credibility. It's the same thing with Amazon's and likes and Twitter account following. I tend to assume that those numbers are doctored.
Yeah.
Much stock in that. What I have is sort of a couple bellwethers. There's several people who I follow on Twitter or on the Google Plus, where if they recommend a game, it tends to sort of be an instant buy for me.
Yeah.
I sort of have this weird secondary subscription feed for games, and sometimes I buy a game based on the genius, heuristic guesses at what I'm going to like. But I think that those are pretty crude too, especially because since there is a lot of the games are generally very cheap and or sometimes free. There's often very little disincentive to buy a game, so there tends to be a lot of noise in the system. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
games that I in quotes own that I think are terrible, and I'll never load on my phone again. But they're still factoring into people like this bot.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. All right, so I think we're almost out of time. So let me just ask you one last question. What is your most anticipated upcoming game right now?
Okay, so the oh man, that's actually a very difficult question. The one
Okay.
I'm working on at the moment is it's called Voltarka. It's oh, this is the first time it's ever been mentioned in public. So
You heard it here first, folks.
I should have a release date or something. It's an iPad, it's a tablet game. It really needs a tablet for space considerations. It
Okay.
won't run on a phone. It doesn't fit. And it's sort of a combination of like Pong and
You had this at the meetup a few
yeah,
months ago.
yeah, I have a I
Yep.
and this is like pinball component. And for a while it was sort of stalled because I had to write my own collision detection. One of the core components of it is that I have there's a Pong component. There's a lot of small things that are going very fast. I have to bounce off moving things, and that's a very difficult problem in collision.
Hmm.
So it took a while to iron that out, but that's done now. So we're moving forward for the campaign. One of the things that I'm excited about is the Leap. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh man, Leap Motion, check it out. It's the future. It's the
Okay.
basic half of Minority Report.
Oh, maybe I have seen it. It's like a little box like so, and it sits on the table.
It's like $50 and it has amazing hand tracking. So we weren't able to push that Voltaren to desktop because it needs multi-touch, but
Yeah.
I think with the Leap I'll be able to actually simulate multi-touch and kind of a space in front
Yeah.
of the computer. I mean, it's not going to work for multiplayer realistically, but for single player at least, it'll be something.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. In the long term, there's a game that I've been wanting to make for like half a decade, which is gonna be about teaching kids math, and that's like really exciting for me personally, because as a someone who is a big proponent of math. But it's a way.
Definitely. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. For you out in cyberspace, if you like what we do here and you would like interviews like this with Sam, why not subscribe either on YouTube or via iTunes? To view the show notes for this episode in particular, or to get more episodes, don't forget to visit GameMinderReport.com/interview/5. To see when the newest games are listed, you can follow GameMinder on Twitter or visit Facebook.com/GameMinder. And to track all your favorite upcoming games, visit GameMinder.com or download the app for iOS or Android. And finally, I just want to say a special thanks to our guest today, Sam Marcus, maker of Oregon Whale and CEO and primary janitor of WhileTrueFork. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
I'm Jeremy, signing off for the Game Minder Report, reminding you, don't forget to play.